Samyang recently updated their popular 85mm f1.4 lens, and this new model promises to be smaller, lighter, and faster than the original. But if you're familiar with the world of 85mm lenses, then you'll probably already know that the Sigma 85mm f1.4 DIDN is currently the top dawg in this focal length group. So, is this new Samyang lens enough to dislodge the Sigma from the top spot? Well, today we're going to find out. In terms of features, the Samyang includes a customizable AF lock button and a custom switch. By default, mode 1 allows the lens to function as you would expect, but in mode 2, the focus ring will allow you to adjust the aperture value instead. Though it's also worth mentioning that further customization options are available for this lens using Samyang's lens dock, but this does have to be purchased separately. The Sigma includes a customizable AF lock button, an MF to AF switch, and a lockable and declickable manual aperture ring. Both lenses include a dust and weatherproof construction, complete with rubber O-ring around the lens mount. Although these lenses are similar in size, the Samyang is around 100 grams lighter than the Sigma, though this is probably due to the fact that it's predominantly made from a composite plastic material, whereas the Sigma is almost entirely made from metal. Although I don't personally mind plastic lenses, this lens in particular does feel slightly hollow compared to other Samyang lenses that I've tested on this channel, and you can definitely feel that the majority of the weight is at the front of the lens where all the heavier glass is. The Sigma, on the other hand, just feels solid as a rock and very nicely balanced. When shooting in manual focus mode, neither lens has any noticeable delay, though the Sigma has a heavier resistance to it than the Samyang. Also, by default, both of these lenses have a fairly long throw to them, which means that you do have to slightly over-rotate your wrist to complete longer focus pulls. Though that said, if you own a Samyang lens dock, you will be able to adjust the sensitivity of the focus ring if this is something that really bothers you. But anyway, when it comes to scoring, both lenses deserve a point for handling in this round, as they are both really nice lenses to work with. However, when it comes to build quality, for me the Sigma just feels like the much more premium option, so it deserves the winning point in this round. When it comes to pricing these two lenses, you probably won't be surprised to hear that the Samyang lens is around $300 to $400 cheaper than the Sigma, depending on where you shop, which makes it a much more tempting choice for those shopping on a budget, and also means that it earns the point in this round for price. When it comes to autofocus in good lighting conditions, both of these lenses were quick to focus with no major signs of hunting. In low light conditions, although the lenses slowed ever so slightly and did take a little bit longer to lock on, they still managed to find the target, and neither of them showed any significant signs of hunting. When shooting wide open in continuous burst mode, the vast majority of the shots I took with both of these lenses were sharp and in focus, with only a very small handful of them being marginally out of focus. So with both of these lenses putting in a pretty damn solid performance, it's points all round. Switching over to video mode, and both of these lenses had absolutely no problem at all tracking George as he walked towards the camera, even when shooting wide open at f1.4. When repeating the test at a faster pace, again, both lenses put in a solid performance and they were able to track George without any issues at all. As for AF noise, both of these lenses are very quiet, though if I was being super picky, and if you listen very closely, you can hear that the Sigma lens does have a slight whirring noise to it, whilst the Samyang is completely silent. When it comes to focus breathing, unfortunately both lenses suffer quite badly, so not ideal for videographers. So with a pretty faultless performance in this round, it's points for both lenses. In our Bokeh balls test, both lenses produced round orbs in the centre that turn into a cat's eye shape towards the edges of the frame. Whilst in terms of general bokeh quality, both options produce a lovely soft defocused area, and you'll be really pleased with the results created by both of these lenses. So this means it's yet another tie and points all round once again. Now, before we move on to the all-important image quality round, there's something we do need to quickly discuss, and that's Samyang's rocky history with quality control and performance issues. If you've seen any of my other 85mm lens reviews on this channel, then you'll probably already know that I've had a bit of a love-hate, mainly hate relationship with the first incarnation of this Samyang 85mm. Now, in my time, I have tested 3 versions of the Mark I version of this 85mm, and of those 3 lenses, 2 of them came with major issues. The first lens I ever tested would just spontaneously lock up my camera during shoots, which not only was insanely embarrassing, embarrassing when I was shooting with clients, but also meant that it had to be sent back due to the risk of me drop kicking it out of the window. Now, luckily, the next copy that I received worked absolutely fine. I had no issues at all, but later on in the year, I received a third copy to test, and this is where I had really bad problems with the AF being hugely inconsistent. Some of the photos I took with it would be absolutely fine. Some would be ever so slightly misfocused, but then a lot of them, unfortunately, would be massively out of focus, despite the back of my camera constantly telling me during the shoot that everything was fine and it was locking onto the model's eye and face without any issues at all. Now, after scouring the online forums, it seems that I am not the only one who's had issues with this first incarnation of this lens, and it seems that everyone else has had loads of problems and nobody can really determine what the problem is. Everyone thinks it's either quality control issues at Samyang or it's something to do with firmware incompatibility between Sony cameras and the lens, but it's still kind of a mystery. But anyway, I'm sure the question you're all asking me is, have I had any issues with this new lens? Well, I'm glad to say that so far, no. I've not had any of those problems with this copy of the lens I've been testing, like I did with the old one, which is good news. However, the story doesn't really end there, because our friend and fellow YouTuber Pav managed to get his hands on this lens before I did, and he reported having issues where it would occasionally lock up his camera. Now, I have to clarify that this is a pre-production copy of the lens that we're testing, and it's not using the final firmware that will be included in the versions that go on sale. And like I said, I've not had any issues at all while shooting with it on both my Sony A7 Mark IVs and A7 Mark IIIs. So, what's the conclusion of all of this? Well, knows? I really don't have an answer for you. I don't know if this is an ongoing problem, but all I can say is that I will definitely be testing this lens again in the future using a copy that has the final firmware. So if you want to see if this does become a problem or not, be sure to subscribe to the channel so you don't miss out. But anyway, moving on to our image quality test now, and in our lens flare test, both lenses display ghosting and artifacting when shooting into direct light, which isn't perfect. Though if this type of thing does really bother you, both of these lenses do come included with lens hoods in the box to help shade the front element in harsh lighting conditions. On a longitudinal chromatic aberration test, the Sigma displays lime green fringing at the top with purple fringing below the area of sharp focus, whilst the Samyang creates green fringing at the top of the chart and a subtle magenta tint at the bottom. However, when shooting with these lenses out in the real world, I really didn't find any faults with either of them, and both of them performed flawlessly throughout the shoot. Now, as I've kind of already touched on, I've tested a lot of 85mm lenses on this channel, and I am a big fan of the focal length. I think it looks great for portraits and it gives you a really nice thick bokeh in the background. And these lenses are really no exception to the rule. As you can see from these real life images, both of these lenses are more than capable of creating beautiful looking images with loads of sharpness and clarity and detail. Now, if you're familiar with the Sigma 85mm lens, you'll know that it does suffer from quite strong pincushion distortion at the edges of the frame. Now, on release of this lens, Sigma did state that this was somewhat intentional. It was kind of a compromise they had to make in order to keep the size and weight down whilst also maintaining high image quality. Some people online debate that, but who cares? Whatever. The main crux of it is that this is easy to fix using the lens correction profiles in Lightroom and Photoshop. Now, although the pincushion distortion issue really isn't that noticeable in these real life images unless you go hunting for it, of course, on the lens chart you can see that it is super clear to see, especially in comparison to the Samyang chart, which has next to no distortion at all. But Sigma are right in what they say. It is super easy to correct, and with a click of a button, as you can see, the distortion is magically gone. Anyway, in terms of sharpness, when shooting at f1.4, both lenses display excellent sharpness and contrast at the center of the frame, with the Sigma lens offering the slightly sharper result of the two. At the corners though, the Samyang offers the best edge-to-edge sharpness of these two lenses despite a touch of colored fringing. When shooting at the lens's minimum focusing distance, both offer good levels of sharpness, but again, the Sigma is the slightly sharper option of the two. So clearly, looking at these results, both of these lenses have their pros and their cons, but ultimately they are both solid performers when it comes to image quality, and therefore I think it's only fair that both of them deserve a point in this final round. So looking at the scores, it appears we have a tie in this matchup, which I'll be honest, I kind of didn't expect. But the bottom line is, which of these options should you go for? Well, to me, it really just boils down to this. If you're not afraid to spend a little bit more on your lenses in order to gain the best in build quality, then arguably the all-metal Sigma is the one to go for. However, if you're shopping to a budget, or maybe you just prefer shooting with super lightweight equipment, then this updated Samyang lens is a superb value for money option that you won't be disappointed with.